Pokeballs. They're what our little virtual friends like to call home, and no trainer is complete without them. But just how exactly do they work? What happens on the inside of them, and what happens whenever a Pokemon is summoned from them? Well, I might just have an explanation of that in my new episode of Gaming Mysteries. One of the most questioned topics I can think of throughout the Pokemon universe is just what happens inside of Pokeballs. While we've gotten glimpses of what it might be like, there is still plenty left up to theorizing, and that's what I hope to solve today. To first figure out what exactly goes on in a Pokeball, we need to look at its roots, and just where it originates from. So to do that, we need to go back to Gens 1 and 2 and look at the different mega conglomerates throughout the various games such as Silphco and Devincorp, and see just how these tools that trainers use every day can transport these little creatures across entire dimensions. Throughout the games Pokemon Red and Blue and Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire, we can see that the distribution and development of Pokeballs is handled by the mega corporations, and they are readily making advancements in the different types of Pokeballs being developed. But just where do these Pokeballs originate from? The origin of the Pokeballs has been noted to have come from the use of apricots that grew in the Johto region. They were hollowed out and modified using a special device, and from then on they were used to catch Pokemon. My theory is that these special devices that the apricots were outfitted with make use of trans-dimensional travel and genetic decoding in order to effectively store and transport Pokemon. While this may sound absolutely insane, surprisingly enough, these things can be seen both within the Pokemon games and our real world, and are currently being worked on and advanced in the scientific industry. To break down how these little capsules work, I'm going to address where the Pokemon go and how they get there. My theory is that whenever you see these Pokemon being sucked inside the ball, you are actually seeing their DNA being read and transcribed through the ball and into a separate dimension that exists through the device inside of the Pokeball. The idea of synthetic DNA transcription and storing of that DNA is actually something that is being worked on today. It's called oligonucleotide synthesis, and in theory is just like writing binary code for a series of deoxyribonucleic strands. The DNA is read and recorded as virtual data, which can be synthesized for later use, so this is presumably what is being done whenever you see the Pokemon being zapped inside of the ball. But what happens on the inside is what is truly interesting. The Pokemon's DNA is then transported through a wormhole into a separate dimension of existence, and as crazy as this sounds, the Pokemon games have actually proposed this before. In Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, after the main storyline of the game is completed, there is a side quest called the Delta episode, in which an asteroid is rapidly approaching the Earth and could threaten all life on it. Well, this is where the massive company known as Devincorp comes into play. In an attempt to keep the asteroid off of a collision course with the Earth, they proposed an idea of completely erasing it from this dimension by using a device called the Link Cable. Other than being a tongue-in-cheek reference to the Pokemon days of old, the Link Cable is capable of opening interdimensional rifts that make it possible to transport this asteroid. Well, it just so happens that Devincorp is also one of the leading companies in Pokeball development. So for what reason could this same technology not be used for the purpose of storing things like Pokemon? And it's undoubtedly been copied and used by other corporations such as Silph and the Pokeball factory in Kalos, a practice that is more than common in real-world business. This system is the perfect solution for the problem of keeping a trainer's Pokemon all in one place. Simply capture them by decoding their genetics, store them in a separate dimension, and then whenever you need them, just recode their genetics to have them right there on the battlefield for you. The only problem that can be seen in this series is that catching and training Pokemon have obviously been around for a long time, so how did they do it initially? Well, the oldest Pokeballs that can be found in the Pokemon universe are from the anime episode A Ship Full of Shivers. In this episode, Ash and his friends find a ghost ship where they find 300-year-old Pokeballs, being the oldest Pokeballs known to date. However, in Pokemon X and Y, the Pokemon trainer AZ single-handedly managed to create a machine that ran off of the pure energy of the spirit of Pokemon that could not only resurrect a dead Pokemon, but also provoke a holocaust that ended an entire war. And he did all of this 3,000 years ago. So I would say the Pokemon universe has had its advanced technology for quite a long time, and even with that, it's obvious that Pokemon didn't always require to be captured with a ball to be trained, such as referenced by Drayden in the Memory Link event in Pokemon Black and White 2, where he says, "When I was little, Pokeballs didn't exist yet. Sometimes Pokemon would run away from awful trainers who didn't try to understand them." So obviously Pokeball development has been fairly recent whenever a man who can't be more than 70 says that he didn't have them in his youth. While it seems weird that there were Pokeballs 300 years ago on a ghost ship and not 70 years ago in Unova, this can be accounted for due to Unova being described as behind the times due to its far distance from the settings of the past generations. This also accounts for why there is only one new Pokeball added in the Black and White games. So now that the technology of these balls have been proven feasible, it can be seen just how much they can tie into the rest of the games. Haven't you ever considered why after catching a Pokemon while the trainer has a full party, that Pokemon is immediately sent to the PC? Well, this is most likely because the PC is simply the long-term storage for the separate universe that the Pokemon is beamed into. They're all interconnected through this technology that has been created to capture these Pokemon. And just why exactly are you always prompted to achieve the trainer's dream of completing the National Pokédex, and to obtain all of those incredibly difficult to find legendary Pokemon? Well, most likely because with every capture, more and more data gets recorded about a certain Pokemon's genetics, which makes future capture of these Pokemon easier because the firmware and oligonucleotide synthesis of their DNA is more well researched and recorded, which is exactly why more common Pokemon are easier to capture, because with every youngster Joey that catches a Rattata, that DNA encoding process is recorded and streamlined, so now simple work is made of capturing them. For this same reason, legendaries are harder to catch, because they have obviously been caught less than most others, and I would assume the DNA of God over here is a bit more complex and difficult to decode than that Pidgey that you picked up on Route 1. Presumably, the more expensive Pokeballs have more intelligent software that allows them to analyze the DNA faster than their less expensive counterparts, meaning that the design and system of catching Pokemon through DNA decoding actually explains capture rates. However, no system is ever perfect, and the one flaw that is synonymous with DNA is the fact of mutations, or small little mishaps that take place whenever DNA and reproductive cells are being coded. Incredibly enough, there are actually examples of this in Pokemon, which presumably occurred during the process of capture, during the DNA decoding or recreation of it. This can be seen with the Pokemon Diancie, a mutation of the Pokemon Carbink, which actually aligns incredibly well with this theory. Most likely, the Pokeball system had a malfunction when catching or summoning a Carbink, and its DNA was transcribed incorrectly, and thus the species of Diancie began. But these ideas are just the tip of the iceberg with the implication that this multi-dimensional system could have. There undoubtedly is plenty more that this incredibly technical system could achieve, and most likely has. Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire provided us with most of the technology used to form this theory, so Game Freak could be planning to expand on this more in future installments. Until that, we'll just have to see what those ideas are.